everyone, I am here, and this is my final Starrcade video, the final one that I plan to do, where I go over the most valuable players in the history of Starrcade. Kind of similar to what I did for showcasing the Immortals for WrestleMania way back in the day. And I'm going to wrap up my talk of Starrcade here in this video. Also going to talk about Season 2 of The Mandalorian, which I watched all in one day yesterday. And just blasted through it. I stayed spoiler-free all season long. By some miracle, I stayed spoiler-free. And I've got a lot to say about it, so I will be tacking that on at the end of this video. I should also note that I am recording this on Sunday, just as Tables, Ladders, and Chairs 2020 is in progress. I am not watching the event. I did not preview the event. I have not been watching the shows leading up to the event. I don't even know what the card is. To show you how out of loop I am with the WWE, earlier today it was rumored and reported that Charlotte Flair would be returning at the event. And my first response was, I didn't even know she was gone. I didn't even know she was off TV. So that tells you how out of the loop I am with WWE. I looked at tonight's show and I was like, I really don't care. I really, really just don't care. And I can't muster the energy to watch the show, review the show. Can't do it. Just can't do it. And the show's in progress as I'm filming this, so it's not like I can read the results either. So I guess there'll be more to say. But before I jump into the main topic of this video, which is Starrcade and The Mandalorian, just wanted to let you all know that latest episode of Weekday Warriors of Wrestling is up. The link to the channel is in the description, so go ahead and check that out. Eric and I had another fun discussion, shall we say, about AEW and WWE and all the little factors in play when it comes to the ratings war, so that's fun. But also, I wanted to remind everybody that I will be doing a live stream later in the week, most likely on Wednesday the 23rd. I will be doing a live stream. Fortunately, my last day of work is Monday, or tomorrow. It's my last day of work before Christmas, so I'll have plenty of time off beforehand, so I might even do it Tuesday, who knows. But for right now, I'm shooting for Wednesday, where I will be doing a live watch-along of the WWE pay-per-view event from December 1997, D-Generation X, a pay-per-view I have never watched before. And I've talked about it before in a previous, it may have been my last stream where I brought it up, but there's a lot of reasons why I never watched that show. There was a bunch going on at the time that pay-per-view just kind of got swallowed up in a vortex of a bunch of other things that were more intriguing. So it'll be interesting to go back and watch that show because I've never watched it before. So that'll be new. I think. Well, there were some of the Clash of the Champions and Saturday Night's main events that I'd never watched before, but this will be the first time where at Saturday Night's main events and Clash of Champions I had like a mostly comprehensive history with. There may have been an episode here or there that I didn't see, but I pretty much knew it all. D-Generation X is a completely different animal altogether. That particular In Your House event where it's like, I don't remember, I didn't watch it, I don't remember it, I couldn't tell you what the results were if you put a gun to my head. It's one of those shows where it's like, I have no idea what happened. I know that Shawn Michaels and Ken Shamrock was the main event for the world title. It's easy to say that Ken Shamrock did not walk out the champion that night. That much is obvious, but hopefully while doing the live watch along, I'll have a fun time watching this kind of rare out of nowhere pay-per-view that nobody remembers. So it should be fun. Like I said, the watch along schedule right now it's scheduled for Wednesday night, so we'll see how that goes. Possibly after Dynamite, that would probably be the best way to do it. Just start live streaming right after Dynamite, and we'll be good to go from there. And that will be my last video for 2020. And we'll just move right along from there. So let's get into Starrcade. Now, like I said, I wanted to highlight the figures that made Starrcade special. And as I'm doing these personalities and listing them, there is no official ranking like best to worst or anything like that. It's just kind of as they came to my mind. And I put the list together, and it was kind of an easy list to put together because, with only 18 Starrcades to work with, some answers jumped out at me quite obviously. So a lot of these are going to be no-brainers, and some of them it's more than one person. It isn't just one person that's going to get acknowledged here. It's going to be an entire group that gets highlighted. So we'll see how that all goes and see whether or not people will agree with me. So first up, I wanted to pay special attention to one Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, the legendary Hall of Famer Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, one of my all-time favorites. My pick for the greatest babyface of all time. You cannot find a better babyface than Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Amazing worker, amazingly likable, and just always fun to watch. He was Mr. Reliable, and he kind of served the same role at Starrcade that he served at the early WrestleManias that he participated in, where he wasn't in the big main event matches, but if you put him on the undercard, he was just Mr. Reliable. He could have a nice, solid match to round out the card. And in Starrcade's history, if you compare it to his WrestleMania history, he had kind of a filler match at WrestleMania 1 that was good, solid match to kind of keep the crowd going. Nothing sexy about it, no title on the line, no celebrity involvement, but it was a good, solid match to round out the card. WrestleMania 2, he had a nice, solid match with Hercules Hernandez, nice clashing styles, and it was if I recall correctly, it was the first match of the LA portion of the show. So it was like, all right, we're into the home stretch here. Let's have a nice, solid match to kind of kick things off for the LA crowd. And he did that. And WrestleMania 4, he was in the opening round of the tournament for the WWF Championship, which he was never going to win. Like, he was never in play to win that thing. But he went out there, had a nice solid match with Greg to kick things off for the opening round. It was one of the better matches of the tournament. So that was kind of Ricky Steamboat's role. He typically didn't have that big of spot at the card. And on WrestleMania, his biggest match was obviously the legendary IC title match with Randy Savage. One of the, many would say, the first true WrestleMania classic. And when he was given the opportunity to shine and steal the show, Ricky could do that. But generally at Starrcade, he was in that kind of mid-card, a mid-card, not the biggest thing on the show, but big enough to where it feels significant, and was typically one of the better parts of the show. 83, he tagged with Jay Youngblood to win the tag titles from the Briscoe brothers in one of the better matches on the show. Again, not as remembered as Flair winning the title from Harley Racer, definitely not the dog collar match between Piper and Valentine, but a nice solid match all the same. 84, he had the match of the night with Tully Blanchard, which isn't saying much because that show was terrible. And even with the weak finish, their TV title match was pretty good. Overall, it was one of the few things on the show that wasn't poorly executed all the way around. And in 93, he had another TV title match with Lord Steven Regal, this one going to a time limit draw. Also a nice solid match, one of the more acceptable, better matches on the show. And that was kind of Ricky's role. His one standout classic, very similar to WrestleMania, where he has the match with Randy as his big classic. The closest thing he had to a Starrcade classic was in 1992, the tag title match where he teamed with Shane Douglas to take on Barry Windham and Brian Pillman, and they successfully defended the titles, which I listed as the best tag team match in Starrcade history. So, and when you look at the importance that tag teams had on Starrcade, I think that's a pretty big distinction to have, because the tag teams typically played a really big role at Starrcade, and to have the best tag title match in Starrcade history means a little bit more than, say, the best tag title match in WrestleMania history, where the tag teams wasn't always the biggest thing on the show, or even oftentimes it was bumped off the card entirely and made pre-show fodder. So, but being the best in the tag team title matches, that's something that actually carries a little bit of weight in Starrcade. And again, it just points to what I say about Ricky Steamboat. He's not always the main event. It's kind of a shame he never had like a Starrcade main event under his belt. But whatever you needed him to do, wherever you wanted to put him, Ricky could deliver, and that was what he always brought to the table. And I think it's very important to highlight his abilities and what he brought. So we'll take that off. Enough of Ricky. And now let's go on to one that might surprise people, because he didn't play... his roles at Starrcade was not prolific. He wasn't at a million different Starrcade events. But when he did participate in Starrcade, it was a really big deal. And that is one Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper wrestled 2 Starrcade matches. The dog collar match in 83 with Greg, and the match with Hogan in 96. And that's not a huge, body of work for Starrcade. He also participated in the main event to 99, where they did the whole angle, which was a rehash of the Montreal Screwjob. Not great. But in a wrestling capacity, Piper only participated at 2 Starrcade events. They are also 2 of the most important matches in Starrcade history and deserve recognition as such. And it's very similar, again, to compare it to his WrestleMania body of work. I said it before when I did Showcasing the Immortals. Hogan gets a lot of the credit for the early WrestleMania success in establishing a legacy for WrestleMania, and I think that's fair. But let's not overlook the contributions of guys like Andre the Giant, Randy Savage, and Roddy Piper. I mean, without him, there wouldn't have been a first WrestleMania angle to sell the first WrestleMania round. You needed that heel, and Piper was that guy. And, you look at the retirement match at 3, the Intercontinental title match with Bret at 8. Piper played a very important role in many of the early WrestleManias, and I think he deserves a lot of credit. And in Starrcade's case, I thought he had the best match, the coolest match, the most remarkable match from the very first Starrcade. So he in essence, had the first Starrcade classic, that brutal dog collar match with Greg, one of the most legendary matches of Piper's career, and one of the key establishing matches in the history of Starrcade, and I think Piper deserves a ton of credit for that. And his other match, the match with Hogan in '96, while not the best match in the world, it did do great box office numbers, a huge buy rate for WCW, and was representative of the growth of the company at that point in time, where they could start doing the biggest buy rates in company history, and it would actually mean something. And at the time, I mean, that match was responsible for the biggest buy rate in WCW history, and I think that's definitely worthy of praise. And credit to Roddy Piper for, not having the best physical match of all time, but to sell me on that match, I was totally hooked. Like, the build-up to that match was amazing. And going back and rewatching the Nitros earlier this year and watching all those promos, I was like, man, I kind of want to watch that match now. So, I want to give Roddy Piper that much credit. Again, it's only 2 Starrcades, but man, what a way to really participate and really add to the legacy of the event with those 2 matches. You can't, when it gets right down to it, even if it's minimal, you can't write the history of Starrcade without the Rowdy one, and I think that's pretty cool. So it's like, yeah, he was a big icon for WrestleMania, but he was a big icon for Starrcade as well. So I think that's worthy of praise and recognition. All right, and from there, we are going to go to a group of people, a group that will be recognized through a specialty division, the Cruiserweight Division. Now, the Cruiserweight Division became something of a major part of WCW's identity, especially during the Monday Night Wars period, because they were offering something that the WWF couldn't offer, and we've talked about it all the time. Every time they've ever tried to do a Cruiserweight division, it just falls flat. And in '97, they tried the light heavyweight division. That just became a filler belt. It's like, it's Taka Michinoku versus whoever we throw up against him this month. And that was all the thought they put into it. It's just Cruiserweights have never been their thing, and it's never been something that they've excelled at promoting. WCW did an exceptional job of doing it during this period, and when you look at the class of names that came out of this thing, Dean Malenko, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Chris Benoit, Ultimo Dragon, Juventud Guerrera, Billy Kidman, Psychosis. I mean, it's like they had all the best cruiserweight wrestlers on the planet, it seemed, all in this one division at one time or another. Actually, the picture I have right over here, you can see it's Rey Mysterio versus Jushin Thunder Liger from Starrcade '96. One of the more remarkable Starrcade cruiserweight matches. It was really '95 with the New Japan versus WCW show, where you started to see the Cruiserweight division really find its place in WCW, or you could see like the early workings of a Cruiserweight division, and by '96 it was in full swing. And I said, the best Cruiserweight match in Starrcade history was Dean Malenko versus Ultimo Dragon from '96. You look at other matches that were had, like the 2 Billy Kidman matches from '98, Eddie Guerrero versus Dean Malenko from '97, one of the better matches on that show. And Dean himself, actually, a key component. And if I'm gonna highlight one man for the MVP of the Cruiserweight division of this particular entry, it's got to be Dean Malenko. He was the backbone of that division, and he wasn't the flashiest guy, but he was grounded, and he gave that division. He made it credible and reliable, and he could work with just about anybody, where he could make the flashier guys like the Rey Mysterios, like the Eddie Guerreros, and make them look like $1 million. And that was what Dean did. He did that job expertly well, and it came through come match time. So, even in the dying days of WCW, like in Starrcade 2000, that car wreck of a ladder match was something that was rare back in those days, and something that showcased what these athletes could do and what they wanted to do and what they were capable of doing. And I think the Cruiserweight division was a great stage for a lot of guys to really get their start and really find their niche in wrestling. Like I said, I don't think Chris Jericho would have become what he became if it wasn't for his work in the Cruiserweight division, specifically that feud with Dean Malenko. I don't think Eddie Guerrero would have became what he became if he didn't start off in the Cruiserweight division and kind of find his voice as a heel eventually down the road. And I don't think Rey Mysterio would have become what he became if he didn't have a Cruiserweight title to fight for, which is perfect for someone like him. And you look at the top talents of the Cruiserweight division, and it almost feels like it almost feels like a Hall of Fame class all on its own. So the Cruiserweight division was, even though it wasn't the main event or anything like that, typically it was the opener because Bischoff, like he said, he liked to start the shows hot, and the Cruiserweights were the best way to do that. They were a huge part of WCW during the Monday Night Wars period, and they played a big part in the Starrcades during that time period, and I think that is worthy of recognition. All right, so we got Piper, we've got Steamboat. Let's pull up, who do I want to do next? Let's do this guy. Let's do Lex Luger. Lex Luger, a guy that I've often found myself having to defend. He's a guy that kind of gets a bum rap online, and I remember when I first got back on the internet, or got on the internet way back in the day, in like 96, 97, like the prevailing narrative is that Lex Luger sucked. And I've always been one of those guys that feels the need to defend him because, as I've said before, the guy definitely had his moments. When you look at his U.S. title run, when you look at his... I love the narcissist gimmick. I thought it was great. I thought it was a better character for him than the Yankee Doodle Dandy thing he was doing when they turned him face, and the Lex Express and all that nonsense. And you look at his run at Starrcade, he really did participate and add to the legacy of that event and have some really good matches along the way. There was the cage match with Dusty Rhodes at 87 for the U.S. title, which Dusty won, but Luger was definitely in a big match with someone at the caliber of Dusty Rhodes. That's a really big deal and made for a really big moment on that show. In 1988, he had his best Starrcade match, which I labeled as the second best match in Starrcade history, the main event with Ric Flair in 88. Best main event in Starrcade as well. Excellent match, and best match of Luger's career. And as I said in my last video, yes, he worked with Ric Flair, but Ric Flair also worked with Ronnie Garvin and Nikita Koloff the previous 2 years, and those matches were nowhere near as exciting as this one. So Luger brought something a little different to the table that wouldn't have been there otherwise if it wasn't him in that role. So I think Luger deserves a ton of credit for that match. He participated in the Iron Man tournament in 89, which, not the best concept, but he's working with Sting, Flair, and Great Muta, and that's pretty elite company right there. So it's says a lot that they thought enough of him to put him in that elite class with those guys. He had the match with Stan Hansen, which I said was probably the match of the night at the 1990 Starrcade. I really enjoyed that feud. He participated in the Battle Bowl in 91, where he lost to Sting. And then when you get into the Monday Night Wars period after he came back, he did participate in Team WCW in the World Cup experiment with New Japan. Also participated in the world title match, the triangle match with him, Sting, and Flair. Won by Ric Flair, who ultimately won the title against Randy Savage later in that show. And really, one of his sleeper hits, I think, and I was really impressed with this match when I went back and watched it, was his match with the Giant in 96. I thought it was a well-built story. Well-built feud that went back all the way to before the NWO even formed, and by this point the Giant had joined the NWO. And I thought they had a pretty good match. I was really impressed with it. Again, you look at those two and you wouldn't think that they would mesh real well together, but they did. And I thought they had a nice match together, and it eventually blossomed into them becoming tag team partners when the Giant turned face again. And I said it when I did my Nitro retrospective. I thought that tag team was very successful, and so of all like the thrown together mongrel tag teams, I was like, that one was a lot better than it had any right to be. But that was very good. He also, unfortunately, he kind of closed out his Starrcade run with some less than significant matches. The match with Bagwell in '97, which was done to try and elevate Bagwell, and it just, I don't know, it felt wrong for Bagwell to go over Luger, to be honest. And he had a match with Sting in '99, which was not the best showing for either guy. They did do the thing with Miss Elizabeth and the silly string and all that stuff, and it was okay, I guess, but it wasn't a huge way to showcase either guy. But Luger's major contributions come in the late '80s, and 1990, the match with Stan Hansen, and in '96, that match with the Giant. And he's such a regular presence that even after he took a long break from WCW, he was able to come back and be a regular part of Starrcade. So there's lots to talk about with Lex Luger in regards to Starrcade, and I think it's not fair to overlook him, and sometimes he does get overlooked. But he was an important part of it, and if nothing else, he gave us the greatest main event in Starrcade history. For my money, the greatest main event in Starrcade history. All right, from there, we'll go from Luger to someone who is stylistically similar to Luger in some ways. I even made the comment that his match with Flair in '88 was kind of like an indicator of what it would have been like if this man had wrestled Flair that exact same year. Unfortunately, we never got it. But, well, we didn't get it in '88. We got it plenty of other times after the fact. But, pull it up. Hollywood Hulk Hogan, who, like Piper, does not have a big run of Starrcade matches. He only participated at 3 Starrcade events. '94, his match with Brutus the fucking Barber Beefcake. '96, he had the match with Piper, and '97, he had the match with Sting. None of those matches are great. Highlighting him as an MVP when he has like matches kind of like that are like, those aren't the best things in the world. But I'm going to defend Hogan and kind of argue that he is an MVP for WCW during that period and the Starrcades during that period. It is an example of growth and financial success that Hogan was in those main events where, in 1994, yes, the matches with Flair were bigger, like the Bash of the Beach and Halloween Havoc, and the matches with Vader in '95 would be bigger on paper. The match with Butcher at '94 was Hogan's first Starrcade main event. And it was a sign, in WCW, like a year earlier, the idea that they would have someone like Hulk Hogan main eventing their pay-per-views was like, no way, that's impossible. They'll never get that. That'll never happen. So for the historic footnote, that '94 match is very significant. And then when you look at '96, like I said, the match with Roddy Piper and that hot feud they had going and rekindling of their rivalry from the mid-'80s drew the biggest buy rate in WCW history up to that point. It was eventually topped the next year in 1997 in the match with Sting, the very controversial match with Sting, which, as I've said before, was the biggest drop ball in the history of wrestling. And if we're going to look at this from a purely technical or purely creative standpoint, it's like, they really dropped the ball with that match. But the build-up is one of the best build-ups in the history of the business. That can't be denied. I think I made the comment once, it's the biggest ratio of awesome build-up to horrible execution when the bell rings, I think that there's ever been in the history of the business. It's never been quite that conflicting with each other. And, but even said, like, he got the biggest main event in Starrcade history under his belt through that build-up to the match with Sting. The match with Roddy Piper was really a big deal. And even the match with the Butcher, as weak as it sounds on paper, was an example of WCW's growing stability and growing, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess, like WCW felt more authentic, I guess, or felt more credible, I guess would be another way to put it, where it's like when you have someone the caliber of a Hulk Hogan, it's like that's going to elevate you at least a little bit. And fortunately, they were able to take Hogan's presence and do something even better with it by having him join the NWO. But even at that point, it was still a big deal that they had Hulk Hogan main eventing their pay-per-views. To have a main event of Starrcade is something that nobody would have ever predicted would have ever happened at that point. So for historical significance and financial success, I am counting Hollywood Hulk Hogan as an MVP of Starrcade. All right, and next up, we are going to do another group of people, this time, once again, another division, the tag team division. Now, I could sit here all day and talk about how cool the tag team division was in the 80s. When you look at all the guys that they had, the Road Warriors, Arnon, Tully, the Steiner brothers, even teams like the Nasty Boys, Harlem Heat, the Outsiders, the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express, the Fantastics, there's just all these guys through and through. It was Doom was another good one. The Samoan SWAT team. Tag team wrestling in the 1980s was awesome, and even into the 1990s, there were plenty of good examples of great tag team wrestling. And it was such an important part of the history of the NWA and Jim Crockett Promotions that it wouldn't be fair for me to highlight just one tag team. And a lot of these tag team matches that they did felt like main events on all their own. I talked about Steamboat and Youngblood versus the Briscoes from the first Starrcade, but that was nowhere near the biggest one. You look at things like you had a couple of cage matches, like with the Rock and Roll Express, where they took on the Russians in a steel cage match for the tag titles in '85. The weaker of the two cage matches, the other one being Magnum TA and Tully Blanchard, but still worthy match in its own right. You also had, the Rock and Roll the next year. They took on the Andersons in a steel cage match, which was one of the better matches on that show. You also had the most significant tag team match in Starrcade history was the Skywalkers match from '86. Again, the match that I'm sure Jim Cornette doesn't want to remember, but it is the biggest tag team match in Starrcade history, and it's worthy of praise for that. In '87, you had Arnon Tully versus the Road Warriors, which is practically a Hall of Fame match. You also had another Skywalkers match between Rock and Roll and the Midnight Express. Not as remarkable as the first one, but still, it's a big deal that they did it again. '88, I've talked about it before when I did my top 10 matches in Starrcade history. Sting and Dusty versus the Road Warriors and Midnight Express versus the original Midnight Express were two of my 10 favorite Starrcade matches of all time, and definitely worthy of praise there. You also had kind of a sleeper hit. It was Kevin Sullivan and Dr. Death versus the Fantastics for the U.S. title. I think that was a really good one as well. In '89, you had the Iron Man tag team tournament. The whole show was nothing but the Iron Man tournaments. And again, not the best showcase for the tag team division, but it was an excuse to get us like the Steiners versus the Road Warriors, which is pretty cool. And was a nice way to show them off, because anybody who knows me knows I'm a huge Steiner Brothers mark. So it was really cool to kind of see that kind of showcasing. And much like what I said about Sting, Flair, Muta, and Luger, it made it look like they were in a pretty elite class. Road Warriors, Steiners, Doom, and Samoan SWAT team. But I think the Iron Man tournament things, they probably looked a lot better on paper than they were in execution. I'm sure on paper it looked amazing, but what can you do? 1990, one of the better matches from Starrcade 1990 was the street fight between Arn and Barry Windham taking on Doom. The Steiners also won the O'Connor Tag Team Tournament, a great showcasing for the Steiners. Even if the tournament itself wasn't that interesting, it was still kind of cool to see the Steiners get the big win and get showcased really, really well. You have the tag title match from '92, which I've already talked about, which is fantastic, my favorite tag team match in Starrcade history. And then you had a few other ones where the roles of the tag teams were kind of reduced throughout the '90s, but you still had these big matches. Sting and Hawk versus the Nasty Boys was way, 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 way too long. I think they were trying to make an epic main event out of that, and it just didn't work. But worthy of mentioning. '94, you had Nasty Boys versus Harlem Heat in a slugfest. You had the Outsiders versus Faces of Fear in '96 in another slugfest. In 2000, you also had the tag title match. It was the Insiders versus Palumbo and Stasiak, and that car wreck cruiserweight ladder match I already talked about. So that was both a cruiserweight match and a tag team match in its own. So a lot of gimmick matches, you have steel cages and scaffold matches and ladder matches and all sorts of other things. A lot of big title matches, a lot of big stars. Tag team wrestling is a very exciting and cool thing when you do it right. And to me, it's an often overlooked aspect of professional wrestling, especially by modern fans. But when you get a good tag team division, there's nothing better. And I think Starrcade was a platform and a stage for some very, very good tag team wrestling stars and matches. And I think if you're a fan of tag team wrestling, Starrcade's history has got you covered, and there's some really good stuff to look up. All right. Vader is somebody that I was a huge fan of as a kid, because it's like you get a big monster guy that just murders all the baby faces, and just instantly I'm going to fall in love with the guy. And again, he doesn't have the most prolific run at Starrcade in that he didn't participate in a lot of events. Luger participated in more events. Sting participated in more events. He only wrestled at 4 Starrcades, but he left a big impact on the Starrcades that he did wrestle for. In 91, he was in the Battle Bowl, lost to Sting, not a big deal. But when you look at 92, he had the match with Sting in the King of Cable Tournament Finals, which many have said is among the best Starrcade matches ever. I agree. I had it up pretty high myself. I also participated in the Battle Bowl, and which was won by Great Buddha. And that was a pretty epic match and a great showcase for his rivalry with the man called Sting. They had a very awesome series of matches, and the King of Cable match, as I said when I did my top 10 Starrcade matches, that's like one of their least spectacular matches on paper, because there's not a title on the line or anything like that. But it's the King of Cable tournament wasn't exactly like the hottest concept on the planet or anything, but as a showcase for Sting and Vader, and for Sting to get that win back over Vader was a huge stepping stone in their story to eventually set up the strap match for early 93. So that was an awesome match and definitely worth checking out. And then his biggest Starrcade match was the match with Flair, the title versus career match, where Vader put up the world title and Flair put up his career on the 10th anniversary of Starrcade. Biggest Starrcade match of Vader's run, for sure. Excellent match. Great stuff all around. Felt big. It was big in build-up and it was big in execution. And Vader deserves a lot of credit for making that match work as well as it did. And in 94, he had the U.S. title match with Jim Duggan, which he won, which I also said was match of the night. Not the biggest match he's ever had, but it was the best thing on that particular Starrcade. Take from that what you will. Probably even bigger than winning the U.S. title was challenging Hogan at the very end of the show, setting up their big title matches for 1995. So there was that. So like I said, Vader, not the biggest run in Starrcade history, but he left his mark for sure. Those 4 Starrcades he participated in, he left a pretty big mark there, and it's definitely deserving of praise. And next up on my list of Starrcade MVPs, I mean, this list would not be complete without this guy. The one, the only, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Get funky like a muggle in public, if you will. Dusty Rhodes, big star, one of the most charismatic superstars in the history of professional wrestling, and played a big part in the formation of Starrcade as a major event for the NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions, what have you. As far as his wrestling capacity in Starrcade, throughout the 1980s, he was one of the biggest attractions during that period and participated in some of the biggest matches in Starrcade's history. Even in like the first one, he was a witness to the main event and Flair winning the title, which set up their matches for 84 and 85. The first match in 84 had to be stopped due to referee stoppage and kind of hurt that match significantly, but the match in 85 was much better, with Dusty getting the big win and winning the NWA title from Ric Flair in one of the best main events in Starrcade history. And then his feuds with Tully and Lex Luger yielded some great mid-card matches for 86 and 87, respectively. They had the first blood match for the TV title with Tully in 86, and the U.S. title steel cage match with Luger in 87, both of which are really good, one of which resulted in a major title win for Dusty, that being the U.S. title in 87. And once again, it just shows like how big Dusty Rhodes was, that he could make the U.S. title feel like a big main event level moment when he wins it. And one of my personal favorite matches that he had in Starrcade was in 88, where he tagged with Sting to take on the Road Warriors as a follow-up to the infamous Spike angle that they did, where the Road Warriors beat the ever-living hell out of Dusty and bloodied him up. The resulting tag title match that we got at Starrcade 88 was fantastic and a great showcase for all 4 men involved, where everyone came out of that looking better. Would have liked a better finish, but as it was just really cool to see Dusty participating with such stars like Sting and the Road Warriors, having such a killer match with them. Really good payoff to the story that they had set up, for sure. And moving right along from there, we've only got a couple more left. The one, the only, the man called Sting. And Sting, I mean, what else can you say? This dude was the he was the flag bearer for NWA and WCW. He was their big icon throughout the 1990s. Sting was the WCW hero. He was the shining star of that promotion. And, he was there in the 80s. He was there in the early 90s during the hard years. He was there when Hogan first showed up. He was the big hero during the NWO stage when he turned into the Crow. And he was there all the way up to the bitter end in 2001, having the last WCW match on the final Nitro against Ric Flair. Sting is a WCW guy through and through, and that is a reputation that he earned and completely deserves for all the right reasons. Sting was their Undertaker, basically, or at least he became that. He's like this weird hybrid of like Hogan, Savage, and Undertaker in this weird sense, where he's got like the athleticism of a Randy Savage and the colorfulness of a Randy Savage with like the good guy hero status of a Hulk Hogan, maybe the face paint of the Ultimate Warrior, and then when he turned into the Crow, he reached like kind of an Undertaker level like mystique type of status. So it's really interesting to see like how Sting evolved over the years and all the different things that he embodied. And I think through it all, I could compare it to other guys, but at the end of the day, he was Sting. That's his identity. That's who he was, and that's the reputation and the legacy that he carved for himself. And you look at his Starrcade matches. His very first match was a six-man tag with the Freebirds taking on Eddie Gilbert, Larry Zbyszko, and Rick Steiner. What a mix of talent that all is. But he would soon get a much bigger match in '88, the aforementioned match with Dusty Rhodes, where they took on the Road Warriors for the tag titles. A huge match that almost feels like a main event onto itself. For the 1988 Starrcade. As I mentioned before, in '89 he participated in the Iron Man tournament, which, not the best thing, but he did win it, and he, the fact that he was in it was a big deal, and it made it feel like this tournament was a big deal on paper, even if the execution wasn't great. 1990 was not one of his more glamorous moments, where he defeated the Black Scorpion, Ric Flair, for the WCW title in a steel cage match. Now, not a shining moment for either guy, but again, it's a Sting-Flair main event in a Starrcade, just done in a way that none of us ever really wanted. He participated in the Battle Bowls in 91 and 92, winning in 91. Lost in 92, Great Muta won in 92, but he did have that aforementioned match with Vader that I talked about, which is one of the best matches in Starrcade history, and a shining example of the rivalry that those two had together. He was also in that match I talked about with Hawk taking on the Nasty Boys in 93, they tried to make it an epic main event, but it just went way too long. 94, he had a match where he defeated the Avalanche, or Earthquake, as we wrestling fans typically call him. Again, not the most spectacular thing in the world, but it was a solid win for Sting on a pay-per-view where it showed that they still had faith in him and they still wanted to use him, even though they'd gotten Hulk Hogan. And, it's funny, when Hogan showed up, you would almost kind of expect WCW to do to Sting kind of what WWF did to Demolition when they got the Road Warriors. It's like, we got the Road Warriors now, we don't need these guys anymore. But they didn't really do that to Sting. It's like they still kept him in the mix, and it was like, no, Sting's our guy. We still want to use him. Yes, Hogan's going to main event, but Sting is somebody that we still want to promote and make a big deal out of. And 94, match with Avalanche, win over Avalanche is a sign of that Sting was still one of their top players. 95, he was involved in the New Japan WCW World Cup scenario, winning his match against Sasaki, and then going on to lose to Ric Flair in the triangle match to earn a title shot, Lex Luger being the other participant. But, man, that should have been one of the best matches in Starrcade history. Sting, Flair, and Luger all together in a triangle match. For some reason, it just didn't click the way I hoped it would. But it's still a big match on paper, given the star power involved. His biggest match in Starrcade history came in 97, as I said, the match with Hogan, which gave, after that amazing build-up, gave WCW their biggest and best buy rate ever. And the nicest thing I can say about a match where almost everything was botched, I could at least say, hey, at least Sting walked out with the belt. So they at least got that moment out of it, because the crowd reaction to it was amazing, and that was great. So the visual of Sting holding the belt up after all that was at least something that kind of, I don't want to say saved it, but it was kept it from being a complete failure, let's say that. And again, Sting deserves a lot of credit for the build-up to that match, even if the execution wasn't all that great. And his final Starrcade would be in 99 in the match I mentioned with Lex Luger, the two rivals, two friends turned rivals and everything else. So, not a terrible match, but not the best match for either guy. But as is, like, Sting definitely left his mark in WCW history, and his matches at Starrcade were both big. They felt like big main events, and I think Sting deserves a lot of credit, not just for Starrcade's history, but for the history of WCW as a whole. Sting is truly an icon, and the biggest icon that WCW ever produced in a lot of ways. All right, and that brings us up to the last ones that I want to highlight as our MVPs. And it's going to be one guy that gets the big nod, but a group overall. It'll be the Nature Boy Ric Flair, but you can't have Ric Flair without his posse, and one of the most legendary groups in the history of professional wrestling, and that would be the Four Horsemen, those guys. That's a picture of my personal favorite version of the Four Horsemen. That's Barry Windham, Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson accompanying the Nature Boy Ric Flair. My favorite version of the Horsemen. I think those men also deserve a lot of credit for the legacy of Starrcade and making it the event that it became. Ric Flair is obviously the number one MVP. If there's such a thing as a Mr. Starrcade, it's got to be Ric Flair, because he main evented so many of the Starrcade events, especially those early ones, very much like Hogan did for WrestleMania. Starrcade wouldn't have been what it was without Ric Flair. 83, he wins the title from Harley Race. One of the biggest main events of the decade, for that reason alone. Then in 84 and 85, he main events against Dusty Rhodes. And then in 86 and 87, he kind of has to make chicken salad out of chicken shit. He's working with Nikita Koloff in 86 and Ronnie Garvin in 87. Not the most interesting matches, but it's still main events for Ric Flair. What those matches lacked in intrigue, they made up for in padding Ric Flair's stats, shall we say, and giving him more Starrcade main events under his belt. His best match in Starrcade history for me was his match with Luger in 88. Amazing match, amazing main event. And 89, he was in the Iron Man tournament that I discussed earlier, where he wrestled Sting in the final match, where he lost the tournament to Sting in that match. But again, another Starrcade main event for Ric Flair. So from 83 to 89, it's pretty much just all Ric Flair main events all the way through. And you can't. It was almost like you can't have a Starrcade without Ric Flair. And when he eventually left in the early 90s, it felt like almost wrong to do Starrcade without him. They even sneaked him into the Starrcade main event of 1990 with the whole Black Scorpion debacle. So that was even another Starrcade main event under Flair's belt. So, but when he left in 91, and it's like trying to do Starrcade without Rick just doesn't feel right. Like, it's, and yes, they had Sting, and yes, they had other options to do, and they had the Battle Bowl to try and make up for it. But again, it just wasn't the same. You didn't have that like epic Ric Flair style main event. But before I go into Ric Flair's return to WCW and his Starrcades throughout the 1990s, let's talk about the participation of his fellow Four Horsemen brethren and what those guys contributed to Starrcade, because they did a lot. Even before the Horsemen formed, you had Arn Anderson in a bunch of matches, tagging with Ole, and I mentioned the cage match with the Rock and Roll Express, which was very good. Tully Blanchard was in a TV title match with Ricky Steamboat in 84. That was pretty good. He was in the best match in Starrcade history against Magnum TA in 85. Amazing match. Deserves a lot of credit for that. Barry Windham in 92 was in my pick for the best tag team match in Starrcade history. Arn and Tully had the match with the Road Warriors. That was one of the better tag matches in Starrcade history. Those guys played a big role in Starrcade, and it wasn't just Ric Flair. So I knew that Ric Flair was going to be like Mr. Starrcade, but I wanted to give a lot of praise to the Four Horsemen as well, because they added a ton. And not both as a group and separately on their own, doing their own things. They were a very important cornerstone, not just of Starrcade, but of the NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions, and of WCW. So I just wanted to give them a bunch of love and make sure that they were praised accordingly. But when you get into the 1990s and Ric Flair's participation in Starrcade, his later Starrcade matches, I think it's important to mention that he did win the world title in 95, defeating Randy Savage after winning the triple threat match. Not among his best matches, but it's another title win for Ric Flair in a Starrcade. I already talked about the match with Vader, the title versus career match in 93, which is one of the best main events in Starrcade history, another one under Flair's belt. And so that's two right there that are among the best moments and matches in Starrcade history that I think Ric Flair deserves a ton of credit for. And adding to it, even in that later stage of his career, he was adding to his legacy and adding to the legacy of Starrcade. 98, he had the match with Eric Bischoff, which was well built. Should have been simple, but Eric went over, which felt odd, only for Flair to beat him the next night. Again, very strange booking. I would have rather just had Flair beat him at the pay-per-view and just be done with it. And it would have been a fun highlight. As is, it just kind of feels like a misfire. And then he was in the corner of DDP and Nash at the tag title match of Starrcade 2000. But other than that, he didn't have a really big role. But I think his title win over Savage in '95 was his last really, really big Starrcade moment, as it were. And like I said, it's maybe if Starrcade had continued and WCW had survived, we would have gotten to a point where Flair wouldn't be at Starrcade, obviously, at this stage. But had Starrcade continued, it would have been like Hogan with WrestleMania, where it's he's not going to be there, but at the same time, it's you can't tell the story of the event without Ric Flair. You can't tell the story of Starrcade without the Four Horsemen. You can't tell the story of WrestleMania without Hulk Hogan. You can't tell the story of the Super Bowl without Bart Starr and Terry Bradshaw and those guys, or Joe Montana, Tom Brady even, who I can't stand. But it's, there's certain names and certain legends that become synonymous with certain events, and I think in Ric Flair's case, he is synonymous with the event of Starrcade, and he is absolutely the number one MVP in Starrcade history, bar none. Okay, guys, now that I've finished my discussion on Starrcade, it's time to jump into the world of Star Wars and talk specifically about The Mandalorian Season 2. Like I said, I was not watching the show week to week. I stayed spoiler-free. By some miracle, I was completely spoiler-free. And I just blasted through the entire show. Saturday, I just watched the entire thing straight. And, I loved it. It was awesome. It was really, really awesome. I'm going to try and stay as spoiler-free as I can because I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it yet. And I do want people to go check out the show because it's absolutely worth your time, especially if you're a Star Wars fan. And I can understand a lot of people getting disenfranchised with Star Wars after the creative failure of the new trilogy. This show makes up for it and kind of is closer to embodying what I think a lot of us wanted when Disney bought Star Wars and the type of material that we expected out of them. It borrowed a lot from the expanded universe. It felt true to the classic original Star Wars film. Borrowed a little bit from the prequels and actually got me to mark out for a few prequel references, which that's whoa, we've come a long way. God, remember when Phantom Menace was the worst one? I miss those days. But, and I also felt while watching the show, I was like, man, the show is rewarding me for watching both Clone Wars and Rebels. So, when you look at what they did and how everything paid off, it was just a wonderful show that kept everything I loved about Season 1, which was the, spaghetti western feel, the Kurosawa movie feel, and, all of those other influences that Lucas drew from for the original films and presenting that type of show and keeping that core relationship intact between the child, the baby Yoda, and the Mandalorian. Again, there are some spoilers involved. I won't elaborate on too many details, but they are still the emotional core of this story, which is good because there's a lot of things that get done in Season 2 that are... I guess some would describe as fan servicey. And I think that's a fair statement to make. They are fan servicey, but the main point of the story is never lost. The focus and the emotion is all derived from the relationship between the Mandalorian and the child, and Mandalorian's search to take the child back to his people and find out where the child belongs and where's the safest place for him in this changing world, this changing galaxy, as we see, as the New Republic is taking over and expanding its power, and the Empire is trying to hold on with almost desperation at this point to try and find some way to maintain their stranglehold on the Outer Rim and various other territories as the New Republic expands. And the Mandalorian and the child are kind of caught up in all of those conflicts that's going on. And again, I'm trying to stay away from spoilers, but there's a lot of things that happened that got me to pop. I think a lot of Star Wars fans popped for them when they showed up throughout the various episodes. There's a lot of references that if you read the expanded universe, you would totally understand what they're referencing. And they also did a lot to set up a bunch of future TV shows. There was that recent Disney, big moment where they announced like all these different things that they're doing and all these different projects, which has me worried because it's like, oh god, if they do too much, it's going to become like a mess. I think the comparison I made on Twitter was like Marvel's Netflix shows, where it's like, oh god, Daredevil's a really big hit, it's really good. Let's do 14 more of these, and that's how you wound up with Iron Fist. That's how you get Iron Fist, when you just oversaturate and you do too much. And I'm fearful that they've got something really good here with The Mandalorian. And, if they think it's like, oh, maybe TV shows, that's the way to go with Star Wars, it's TV shows. And they'll do like 14 of these things, and then everything gets lost in the shuffle. So hopefully they know what they're doing, and they keep the quality that they currently have with The Mandalorian, which is, for my money, it's the best Star Wars thing that's been produced since the original movies. It's that level of good. And it kind of reminds me of why I'm a Star Wars fan and why I love this stuff. And I was telling somebody the other day, it's like, dude, the season 1 of The Mandalorian kept my love of Star Wars alive, coming after Rise of Skywalker, which was just horrible and almost killed my interest in Star Wars. Mandalorian kind of saved it, and season 2 maintained it, and actually made me excited for potential things that they could do in the future with some of the things they set up. So, all right, I'm going to go into spoilers because I feel like I have to. I don't have a choice to really give the full experience of what exactly happened this season. And it's only 8 episodes. But one of the things I liked about Season 1, and they kept that with Season 2, is that each episode, there is a story arc throughout the season, but it's not overly reliant on cliffhangers and getting you to binge. It went for more of like what you would have seen in the 90s with shows like Buffy and shows like Xena and Hercules and Star Trek The Next Generation and things like that, where it's you have your cliffhangers, but not every episode is a cliffhanger. And a lot of episodes have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's a full story right there. There's one episode, it's just the Mandalorian, the child, and a passenger trapped on an ice planet trying to escape from ice spiders. And that's the episode. And that's it. And it works as its own standalone story. And I think The Mandalorian excels in that. And the fact that it's as well received as it is has me go, oh, thank God. We can get away from kind of that like over-reliance on cliffhangers and getting people to binge. Because I think a lot of shows rely on that too heavily. And it's sometimes it becomes like grating to watch if you do it too much. Jessica Jones was a show I felt relied too heavily on the story arc, when that was the very premise of the show is that she's a PI. It's like, dude, you can do standalone stories here and it would be great, but they decided not to do that. I would have taken it more of a Sherlock Holmes direction. That's what I would have done with Jessica Jones, and that's what I wanted, and ultimately that's not really what we got. But anyway, I'm just, complaints about other shows. But moving forward from here, I'm going to talk about spoilers in The Mandalorian, so you have not seen it, turn the video off now. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, God damn it, Luke Skywalker showed up in the last episode. The moment that had everybody in tears and all the fans were just losing their mind at that. And some people pointed this out, and it's true. The CGI that they used on Luke, which I believe I heard it was Sebastian Stan as the stand-in, and they had Mark Hamill doing the voice. The CGI was not great. Probably a little better than Rogue One, but still not, perfect. And it was clear that it was okay, they CGI'd a face. I didn't care. And very much like Rogue One, I don't care. It's because you need Tarkin there for Death Star backstory. So if he's not there, it's going to feel wrong. And so it's all right, yeah, it doesn't look great, but I'll let it slide. Princess Leia at the end of that movie, okay, doesn't look great, but she needs to be there at the cliffhanger that leads into A New Hope. So I get it. It makes sense. Totally makes sense. And here it looked a little better, still not there. Maybe in a few years the technology will improve and we'll be able to get it right. But I was just happy to see Luke. And it was a nice surprise because they built up that the child had contacted this Jedi. And which in my mind I was like, oh, so it's Ezra from Rebels, right? Because they name dropped Thrawn at one point, and Thrawn and Ezra were tied together at the end of Rebels, the way that show ended. And I was like, oh, so it's Ezra, right? Is that what they're going to do? Like a grown-up Ezra is going to come and save the day? Because they referenced the TV shows like Clone Wars and Rebels quite a bit. Like, they reference them quite a bit in this show. It's like, I don't know how that's going to play for people that didn't watch either show, but as someone who did watch both, it felt like I was rewarded. It's like, oh, you watched both shows? Well, here's all this stuff that you're going to enjoy. Have fun with that. But I have to talk about Luke. When I saw the X-Wing land, I was texting my sister while watching it, and I was like, wait, there's an X-Wing? And I was putting two and two together in my head, and I'm like, no way. And she had already seen it, so she was like sending me the little like smiley faces and funny gifs and everything else. And then when Luke showed up, I was like, Jesus Christ Almighty, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And an appropriate ending, because Luke, the symbol of the Jedi that we know from the original movies, is now going to take on Grogu, Baby Yoda. More on that in a little bit. Take on Grogu as a student, leading to a tearful goodbye between Mando and the little child. And I think that's the point. Luke is gravy. Luke is absolutely gravy. You could have cut him out, and the show still works. The reason I say that is because fan service is fine if you do it well and everything, and you got us all to pop, and that's great. But the show didn't lose sight of the fact that the key relationship and the emotional tie to the show is Mando and the child. And that tearful goodbye, where Mando takes his mask off to say goodbye to him, I mean, that was like some pretty powerful shit. After, he'd barely taken his mask off at all prior to that point. And really only did it when he was absolutely forced to, where he had to. And in that moment, he just willingly took the mask off in front of everybody just to say goodbye to this child that he had bonded with over the course of the series. And it was a wonderful, tearful moment. I mean, I was getting emotional while watching it. More so than I did for the fan servicey stuff, because it's the emotion that really drives the story, and that's what made the original Star Wars work. And you can have all the fan service you want. And Luke was great and everything. I think Luke heightened that moment and made it even more impactful. But that was like the perfect ending almost, was that tearful goodbye, and I just absolutely adored it. And going to the earlier episodes, the action throughout the show was just great. You get a car chase sequence where they have to break into an Imperial base to get the information they need to find the captured child once he gets captured, which, by the way, when Chapter 14 came up, and it was titled The Tragedy, I was like, oh shit, I need a stiff drink before I watch this thing, because I know what's going to happen. I already know what's going to happen. And I was like, I need a stiff drink. But that car chase sequence, that was really good. The first episode, the battle with the Krayt Dragon, was awesome, and felt like that moment in the original Knights of the Old Republic where you have to fight a Krayt Dragon. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. It had that old school spaghetti western type of feel to it that I loved about season 1. That was still there throughout. The Ahsoka episode, which was one of my favorite episodes of the season, felt like an old samurai movie, and that was great. And Rosario Dawson, who plays Ahsoka, I had known that Ahsoka was going to be in the show because her casting was announced before season 2 dropped. And I was kind of like, that's cool because I like Ahsoka. I kind of felt like Ahsoka should have been killed off at the end of Rebels, or not at the end of Rebels, but when she confronted Darth Vader in Rebels, I felt like, and she could have gotten her hero's end right there, and it would have been perfect for her, but they ultimately decided not to kill her. And I was like, well, if they can come up with something good for her to do, that'd be great. And here we have a live-action Ahsoka, and I'm like, okay, let's see where this goes. And I was a little, I don't want to say concerned, but I was curious to see how, like, an animated character, who I'd only known her as an animated character, how would she translate to live action. And Rosario Dawson, she looked great. She looked great in the getup. She played it well. It was like, yeah, that's Ahsoka. That's her. And that episode was fantastic. And so I love that one. I love the Ice Planet episode that I talked about. I love stories like that. I loved the one that Carl Weathers directed. Another little adventure for Mando and Cara Dune and Carl Weathers' character. I love the episode with the Mandalorian trio where he comes across Bo-Katan and gets involved with Mandalorians that he feels aren't true Mandalorians based on his belief. And it goes into the whole, again, where if you watch Clone Wars, you would understand a lot of this, like the different belief systems of the different people from Mandalore and everything else. And it's also elaborated on in Rebels as well. using some of the same characters and everything. Of course, Sasha Banks was one of the Mandalorians. I have to bring that up. And she was a small role, but she was effective in the role that she played, so there's that. God, there was so much I enjoyed. There wasn't anything I disliked. It was one of those shows where I was just thoroughly entertained all the way throughout. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience all the way through. The whole show, both seasons. It's 16 episodes that are absolutely worth checking out. When you get into the more fan servicey stuff, I've got to mention the name drop of Grand Admiral Thrawn, which I went nuts for that. Which, if that's the basis for the Ahsoka show, where she's hunting down Thrawn, I'm like, thumbs up, thumbs up. We get a live action Grand Admiral Thrawn, thumbs up. That's good shit. It's good shit. We also got a return of Bill Burr's character for kind of not a prison break episode, but something similar to that, similar to what he did in season 1. And Gina Carrano returned as Cara Dune. She's great. I mean, I love Gina Carano. She's great in everything I've ever seen her in, where she's just... It's because she's a real fighter. She's a total believable badass. Sometimes they go a little too hard to make a character seem like a badass. She does it effortlessly because she legitimately is a badass. And she just... You don't fuck with her. There's one part where she... locks somebody in like a rear chokehold, and I was like, she knows how to apply that hold for real. This chick's legit. And it's like, yeah, this is acting, but she knows how to do that for real. And I have that in the back of my mind whenever I watch her do stuff, and she's just so much fun to watch because of that. And she acts just well enough to add to that credibility as well. We find out she's from Alderaan, which I don't remember if they had mentioned that in season 1, but they get some good stuff out of that as well. And I've got to mention, I talked about Luke, I talked about Ahsoka. What about Boba Fett? And that was funny. I was watching the first episode, and they set up Boba Fett's armor in a very clever way. That was great. And the dude that had the armor looked completely wrong in it. But I think that was by design, because it's not Boba Fett wearing the armor. And it's like, okay, I marked out for the Boba Fett armor, but this guy doesn't look right in the armor. But then you see the end of the episode, and you see that guy who's clearly tracking the Mandalorian. And I looked at him, and I was like, he looks like the guy that played Jango Fett. And again, I'm texting my sister while watching this, and she's like, keep watching it. And then I saw his name pop up in the credits, and I was like, okay, so if that's the guy that played Jango, that's Boba. That has to be Boba, based on what we know about Boba. And she was like, yeah, you're right. And I was like, oh, shit, Boba Fett's coming in. And he showed up, and he was great. And it was cool to see Boba Fett actually do something, because that was always the thing in the original movies. He was the coolest character that didn't do anything. And I've argued before that his getting over and him becoming an iconic character and becoming popular was largely born out of fan interest, because he was such a cool-looking character, but ultimately didn't do much. And it was an accident that he got over the way that he did. And then the expanded universe rolled around and greatly expanded his role, and that turned into that's where Boba Fett kind of became a legend. But to see a live-action Boba Fett actually doing cool stuff, and of course, it's dovetailing off of aspects of the prequels that we didn't like. Like, we never needed to see Boba Fett as a 9-year-old. I never wanted to see Boba Fett unmasked. I never wanted to know his origin. That was the whole appeal of the character, was that we knew nothing about him, and the more mystery the better. But they took those aspects and made him a really cool character in the show, and ultimately a side character that was used to kind of dovetail and do his own series, which that post-credits stinger at the end was awesome, and of course a fat Bib Fortuna. I didn't know, that's my favorite thing I didn't know what I wanted. But it looks like Boba Fett's going to be taking over the underworld and the Hutt Empire, and I'm like, ooh, this could get cool. That could be a really cool show. We get a Boba Fett show. That's awesome. So, a lot of great action, great emotional core, a lot of fan service, exciting and entertaining and heartfelt all the way throughout. I thought the show was great. Season 2 of The Mandalorian, I think it surpassed Season 1 in a lot of ways. You always worry about that second season slump. That did not happen here. I thought it was absolutely great, and the way they paid off a bunch of different things and set up other things was actually really, really well done. Because again, you can do all the fan service in the world, but if you don't have that emotional hook or that emotional attachment, it's not going to work. And the relationship between Mandalorian and little Grogu, like I said, he gets a name this season, which I pop for. It's like, oh, he's so cute, he has a name. It's great. But the relationship between those two carries the show and elevates it above just a soulless cash grab for more Star Wars material. It's so far above and beyond that. And the people that worked on the show, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni especially, these are two people that understand Star Wars. And it's clear that they do. And again, I hate to be this guy, but when you look at 7, 8, and 9, and you look at what JJ and Kathleen Kennedy and what Rian Johnson did, it's clear to me, it's like, okay, they understand Star Wars on like a surface level, like the way like a child understands it, where it's, and I'm not trying to sound demeaning, but I'm really sounding demeaning when I say this, but it's, they understand it in a sense of like, oh, that looks really cool, let's do that, or hey, that's a really cool idea, let's do that. These guys understand the rules of the universe and the style of the universe and what Lucas's inspirations were. I think a lot of the inspirations on Star Wars have kind of been lost to time because a lot of today's filmmakers, they didn't grow up with the Flash Gordon serials. They didn't grow up with the spaghetti westerns. They didn't grow up with the Kurosawa films. So they don't have that context. Again, maybe they do, I don't know, but that context is kind of lost on the modern thinkers that are put in charge of stuff today. These people, Filoni and Favreau, seem to really understand it and get those influences, get where it comes from. And that explains a lot of the visual direction and a lot of the story direction that the show took. Filoni in particular, in some ways he understands Star Wars better than Lucas does because he worked on Clone Wars and Rebels, and there was a story, a behind-the-scenes story I remember hearing from Dave Filoni. It was like an interview he did or something. And he talked about, there's an episode of Clone Wars where Anakin is testing this special, like, revolutionary one-man ship. And it has a cloaking device, which means it could be invisible. And Anakin's, like, testing the ship. And as because Lucas pitched the story idea to do this, and Filoni turned to him and he said, but George, no ship that small has a cloaking device. Basically quoting a complete throwaway line from Empire Strikes Back, but he understands the rules of the universe. And Lucas just kind of had the attitude of, well, this one does. And Filoni and his team, they wrote the episode around it to make it as restrictive as possible to where that line from Empire Strikes Back wasn't really as broken as it could have been otherwise. So he gets it and he cares. There's also an episode where the clone troopers are playing the 3D or the monster chess that Chewbacca and R2-D2 were playing in the original film. And when he knew that they were going to be doing that, Filoni said, "Oh God, we've got to make it look the way that it did in the original film, just to keep like continuity." And he was like, and he said, "I have to go to George to talk about it and make sure that it looks exactly like it did in the 70 film." But I know exactly what George is going to say. He's going to say, it looked the way it does in 77 because that was the limitations of the special effects. We can make it look better now. Why don't you want it to look better? And he's like, I don't want it to look better. I want it to look the same as it did to keep continuity. And because it's cooler to make it look the same way that it did. And that's that Filoni, he gets it. Like, he just gets it. And I think the creative minds involved in this have done a stellar job. And kind of reinvigorated a lot of people's love of Star Wars after coming off of such a disappointing sequel trilogy that a lot of people lost hope after Last Jedi. And those that hung on after Last Jedi, I think Rise of Skywalker effectively killed it. So it's it wasn't great. It wasn't great, but Mandalorian has definitely filled that void. It's like, man, why didn't we just get this from the beginning? I think if this had just been the thing that Disney made right from the get-go, we would have all been okay. It's like, look, don't make any movies. Just go right into expanded universe stuff, and I think we'll be okay. So, coming out of this, I can honestly say I'm... does The Mandalorian need a Season 3? That's the thing, because there is one major hanging story thread, and that's the fate of the Darksaber and who's the true owner of the Mandalorian Darksaber, which was a hanging thread from the end of Season 1, where we found out that Moff Gideon, who I just keep calling Moff Gus Fring, but Moff Gideon was in possession of the Mandalorian Darksaber, which if you watch Clone Wars and you watch Rebels, that's a really important relic and kind of MacGuffin for driving a lot of the Mandalorian-centric stories. Darth Maul was in possession of it at one point. And there's a hanging story thread with the Darksaber that they could build Season 3 around. But the way that we got that tearful goodbye between Mando and Grogu, I kind of feel like the Mandalorian's done. I kind of feel like it's like, no, you can end it right there, and I think we're fine. But who knows? But I'm sure there'll be a Season 3. I'm sure it'll move away from the Lone Wolf and Cub kind of stories that you got from this one. But for right now, I'm kind of happy with that being the ending, but we'll see what happens. I'm super excited for the Book of Boba Fett, which they called it, to see what happens there. I'm super excited for the Ahsoka show because I want to see her hunt down Grand Admiral Thrawn, and to get a live-action Thrawn would be great. I don't know... I know there's a Kenobi show, and they've got a few other shows lined up for things they can do. For right now, they've already got me hooked on a Boba Fett show and an Ahsoka show, so thumbs up for that level of effort, and hopefully all of that turns out really well. We'll find out more as the years go on and more material is released. But for right now, I can truthfully say that I am a happy Star Wars fan with Mandalorian Season 2. It was great, it was stellar, and I loved it. So that is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. Just a quick reminder, check out the latest episode of Weekday Warriors of Wrestling with me and Eric Clancy. The link to the channel is down below. And be sure to join me for my live stream, which I will, again, tentative plan is to do it Wednesday after Dynamite and NXT. I'm watching AEW, but it's after both shows. My live stream where I will do a live watch-along for In Your House, D-Generation X from December 97, so be on the lookout for that. I also have a few things to tell you guys, yeah, something's coming, so that's all I'll say at this point. But for right now, I am done. Thanks again, everybody, for watching, and I will see you all later.